Now when you're in the design of a table, we've addressed the fact that the top half of the table design contains columns like field name, data type, and description. What I'd now like to look at is what occupies the bottom portion of the screen, which are the field properties. Now the field properties vary per data type. So for example, when I'm clicked on title of courtesy and then I look at the properties here, the properties that I see for title of courtesy will be different to the properties that I see for birth date, because birth date is a date time field. When I click on email, which is a hyperlink, it will have different properties again. So each field has its own properties, and the properties will vary depending on the data type. What I'd like to do is start with the first property, which is field size, and I'm going to click on title of courtesy. When I click on title of courtesy, which is a short text field, and I look at the first property, which is field size, and click it, as I mentioned in an earlier video, this is the maximum number of characters you're allowed to enter in this field, with the maximum for a short text field being 255. Now when it comes to a title of courtesy, I think that 10 characters is probably ample. So I'm going to click field size and just type 10. Now they won't be able to type more than 10 characters into that field. When I click on first name and I click on field size, I might set that to 50. When I click on last name and click on field size, I might set that also to 50. So I'm just choosing each field, job title, field size, and job title I might set that to also 50. Be as tight as you can as developers, because then you're making your database tight and it will perform better. And it's much easier to increase things as the users require them, rather than to take away field sizes or reduce field sizes and truncate data at a later stage if the database decides to perform slowly. When I click on birth date, I don't get field size, so the next one that will have field size will be the address. So field size applies to short text fields. I'm going to change the field size to 100, and the same for address line 2. Town and city, I'll also make that 100. And home phone, I'll make that 12. Hyperlink, it doesn't apply. Salary, it doesn't apply. Married, it doesn't apply. Dependents doesn't apply. Note, it doesn't apply. That's long text, and that's it. Now field size does apply when you're setting actually on a number field. When I click on a number field or a short text field or even an auto number field, I do get a field size property. When it comes to a short text field, I just enter a number between 1 and 255, but when it comes to a number or auto number, notice that the field size has defaulted to long integer. Now when I hit the drop down here are my choices. Now the choices depends on how big a number you're going to store, whether you're going to also store negative values, and also how many decimal places you're going to store. So for example, if I was to set dependent to a byte, it means that the user can enter a number between 0 and 255. It takes the least amount of space, and therefore the database is as tight as it can be, but it doesn't allow you to put decimal points. If I, for example, was to choose integer, then I could put a number between negative 32,768 and positive 32,767. I still would not be allowed decimal places. So if I have a field like hectares where I do need to enter decimal places, really I need to be looking at something like a single or a double or even a decimal. A single allows you to put up to 7 decimal places, a double allows you to put up to 15 decimal places, and a decimal allows you to put up to 28 decimal places. So you have to decide what's the best field size based on, do I need to enter decimal places like 0.5? Do I need to enter negative numbers, or do I only need to enter positive numbers that fall within a short range like 0 to 255 and no decimals? Now when it comes to dependents, which is the number of children, we don't have statistically negative children, so I can choose a byte. We don't technically have more than 255 children, and we technically don't have decimal places like 0.5 of a child. So I'm just going to put it on byte. That's the most appropriate field size setting. So that's the field size property as it applies to only short text, number, and I'm going to leave employee ID, which is an auto number, as a long integer, which will accept a very large number from negative to 2,147,483,648 to positive the same amount is huge. Now, format is the next property I'd like to look at, and I'm going to click on Town City. The format property with regards to a text field is a matter of typing what you want. Basically, when you click the drop down, nothing appears, so you have to know what to type, which is either a greater than or a less than. If you type a greater than, then Access will format whatever you type in that field, Town City in this case, to uppercase. If you type a less than, whatever you type in that field, when you press enter, Access will format it to lowercase. If you don't type anything, it'll be formatted the way the person typed it. So I want it to make sure that whatever town or city they type automatically appears in uppercase. So I'm going to put a greater than sign. When it comes to email though, I'll click email, I'll go to format, and I'll put a lowercase. That means whatever they type in the email field will automatically be formatted to lowercase. And that's the format property with regards to text fields. But the format property with regards to number fields is a bit different. So I'm going to click on dependent, which is a number field. I'm going to go to the format property and click the drop down, and notice that there are options listed when it comes to a number field. I can format the number that they type to either currency, a euro, fixed to so many decimal places, standard, which is a comma every thousandth in decimal places. I can format it to a percentage or scientific notation. I'm going to format whatever they type to be fixed, and I'm going to set the decimal places to 0, just to be pedantic. So you can format numbers in a variety of ways. The format property when it comes to a date field, so I'm going to click on birth date, is different again. I'll click the format property, I'll hit the drop down, and when it comes to a date, I can basically have a long date, which is full day, full month, full year. I could have a medium date, which is 3 letters for the month, or I can have a short date, which is what it is by default. I'm going to choose medium date and do the same for higher date. I'll format my higher date to a medium date. And that's the format property in the context of a text field, a number field, or a date field. The next property I want to look at is the caption property, and I'm going to start with employee ID. When you're viewing the table, and maybe we should do that, I'm just going to hit the view button and view the table and save yes. It does tell me some data may be lost, and this is because we have reduced field sizes from 255 to say 10 in the case of title accuracy. We won't lose any data because I know we've only got one record and it falls within the boundaries, but it is just a warning saying some data may be lost because you've cut your field size down, so we'll just go yes. Now, as far as what's already occurred, I can immediately see that birth date is a medium date, higher date is a medium date, and town and city is uppercase. And email actually already was lowercase, but it appears in lowercase. And so we're actually seeing the effects of our format properties already. As far as field size went, if I went and tried to type, I would only be able to put 10 characters at most in the title of courtesy. If I wish to drop what I've just tested here, press the escape key and you can drop what you've just tested. So that's handy. Now the field names are the column headings. So for example, we can see title of courtesy, one word, employee ID, one word, address line 1, one word, address line 2, one word. And so you can actually see your field names. Now because I encourage you to put short field names, no S's and no spaces, they can look a little bit unfriendly. So the caption is what you want to call the column heading that looks a little bit more friendly, like do you want spaces and S's, etc. So I'm going to go back to design view by hitting my view button. I'm starting with employee ID. I'm going to go to caption and I'm just going to type ID. And then I'll go and view my table. If I view my table and I'll say yes, I want to save, the column heading now just says ID instead of employee ID, which means that I can double click and bring the column width in. And so on and so forth. So you may decide that those ones that don't look so friendly, you can actually change the caption. So I'll go back to design view. I might put, instead of title of courtesy, I'll just put title as a caption. Instead of first name with no space, I'll put first name as a caption with a space, last name with a space as a caption, job title with a space, birth date, and so on and so forth. Hire date, and I'll leave it as that. You can get the idea. In fact, when I rest on caption or click on caption, I read this over here. This is the label for the field when used on a view. If you don't enter a caption, the field name is used as the label. So it's an alternative label for a field. When I go to view the table and I'll save yes, I'll see that my titles or labels now appear, and they're more user friendly. So that's the caption property. The next property I want to look at is the default value. So for example, if the majority of people come from the town or city Tauranga, then I'll click on town or city, I'll go to default value and I'll put Tauranga. When I press the down arrow, let me do that again. So I type Tauranga. When I press the down arrow, it automatically puts double quotes around the outside of that. So it does a lot of syntactical things for us, and let it do that. It just means that when you take it out completely so that you don't get some sort of hybrid of incorrect syntax. Now when I go to view the table and save yes, the next record here by default is sitting on Tauranga. So if I go to create a new record, by default the town or city will say Tauranga, which means I don't have to type it, but if it's Rotorua or Taupo, then I just overtype it with what I want. It just saves a little bit of typing for people. And I'll go back to design view. The next two properties work together. They are validation rule and validation text. Now, for example, I might decide that when it comes to the salary, nobody earns a salary less than 20,000. So I'll click on salary, I'll go to dip validation rule, and I'll put greater than equal to 20,000. That's my rule. And over here it says an expression that limits the values that can be entered in the field. Now when I click on validation text, it says this is the error message that appears when you enter a value prohibited by the validation rule. So the validation text might be, you cannot enter a value less, 20,000 or less. Please try again. So if I go and test my rule, I'll go to view, I'll save my table yes, and it tells me that some of the rules have changed. Yes, some of the rules have changed. I've just changed the validation rule. So I'll go yes and switch into my datasheet view. Now when I go across, pressing tab or the arrow key to the salary, if I try to put 19,000, as soon as I press enter, my message appears. This is my validation text. You cannot enter a value 20,000 or less. Please try again. So I'll go OK and I'll press escape to drop it. So that's another way of making sure that what they enter into a field is valid. We tend to use things like comparison operators, so it has to be greater than, less than, greater than, and less than, those sorts of things. Or we tend to use or. It has to be this or this or this. So I might go to town and city, for example. If I go to design view and I go to town and city, I might enter a validation rule that says Tauranga or Taupo or Whakatane or Rotorua and so on. And then my validation text would say must be Tauranga, Taupo, Whakatane or Rotorua. Please re-enter. So if they do a spelling mistake, it'll not let them enter the spelling mistake. I'll view it, I'll save yes, my rules have changed, yes, and I'll change it from Rotorua to say Raglan. When I press enter, you must enter Tauranga, Taupo, Whakatane or Rotorua. Please re-enter. I'll go OK, press escape, and it's done. And back to design. So validation rule is a rule either title loose that you can apply to all or some fields to ensure that what they enter in that field is valid, and the validation text is the error message that comes up if they break that rule.